My ex-fiancée walked into my wedding 10 minutes before I was supposed to say I do. And the first thing she said was not my name, not an apology, not some desperate confession of love, but 7 words that made every person in that church turn cold. Ask her what she did with the money. The woman standing beside me, my bride, tightened her hand around mine so hard that her nails cut into my skin, and when I looked at her, expecting shock or confusion, I saw something much worse. I saw recognition. The whole church went quiet in that strange, heavy way a room gets quiet when people understand that something private has just become public, and for one long second I could hear the rain tapping against the stained glass windows, the nervous breathing of my mother in the front row, and my own heartbeat moving up into my throat. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 37. I live outside Charlotte, North Carolina. And until that afternoon, I honestly believed the worst mistake of my life had been letting my ex, Lauren, walk away 3 years earlier. I was wrong. The worst mistake of my life was believing the woman in the white dress. Her name was Emily Vaughn, and to everyone else, she looked perfect in the way people trust too easily. Soft brown hair pinned neatly under a veil, calm blue eyes, a quiet smile, the kind of voice that made waiters apologize even when she was the one being rude. She worked in marketing for a medical supply company, drove a white Lexus she said she leased through work, and had a way of making normal life feel like something you had outgrown, as if your old couch, your old friends, your old habits, and even your old pain were embarrassing things she was gently helping you replace. When I met her, I was still angry at Lauren. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. Lauren and I had been together for almost 5 years, and we had broken up after $12,000 disappeared from an account we had opened together to save for a house. She swore she had not taken it, cried on my porch for almost an hour, and kept telling me to check the records properly, but I was too proud, too hurt, and too ready to believe that love could turn into theft overnight. Emily came into my life 6 months later at a fundraiser downtown, wearing a black dress and laughing at a joke I didn't think was that funny, and within 2 weeks she knew exactly which wounds to touch and exactly what to say about them. A woman who really loved you wouldn't make you doubt your own eyes. She told me one night while we sat in my truck outside a restaurant in South End, and because I was still carrying the humiliation of being lied to, I let those words sink deep enough to become truth. So when Lauren started texting me 2 months before the wedding, saying she needed to talk and that it was important, I blocked her after the 3rd message. Emily said Lauren was jealous. My best man, Travis, said the same thing. My mother said some women only come back when they see you happy. And I, like an idiot, accepted all of it because it was easier to believe my ex was bitter than to ask why my future wife looked nervous every time Lauren's name appeared on my phone. The wedding was at a small church outside Matthews, the kind with white wooden doors, polished pews, and a bell tower that looked pretty in pictures but leaked every time it rained. Emily had planned almost every detail herself, from the ivory roses to the string quartet to the little cards on the reception tables that said, "Finally home," which I thought was sweet at the time and now cannot think about without feeling sick. My father had died when I was 29, so my mother walked me halfway down the aisle before taking her seat, and I remember her squeezing my arm and whispering, "Your dad would be proud," even though her voice sounded uncertain, as if she were trying to convince herself before she convinced me. Emily stood at the altar, looking beautiful and unreadable. Travis stood beside me, smiling too much. The pastor began speaking. The guests settled into that warm wedding silence. And for a few minutes, everything moved exactly the way it was supposed to move, like a scene rehearsed by people who all knew their parts. Then the doors opened. Lauren stood in the entrance with rain on her hair, no makeup, and a dark green coat pulled tight around her body. And the first thing I felt was not love or guilt, but anger, because I thought she had come to drag the past into the one day I had finally managed to escape it. Travis muttered, "You've got to be kidding me," under his breath, but his face changed before his voice did. He looked scared. That was the first crack. Emily leaned toward me and whispered, "Do not let her speak." And maybe if she had said it differently, maybe if she had sounded offended or confused or heartbroken, I would have stepped forward and told Lauren to leave. But she sounded afraid. Lauren walked down the aisle slowly, not dramatically, not like some jealous woman trying to ruin a wedding, but like someone who had spent weeks deciding whether to destroy a moment or save a man from it. She stopped 6 feet away from us, looked straight at Emily, and then looked at me. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Ask her what she did with the money." A few people gasped. My mother stood up. Emily laughed once, a small sharp laugh that had no warmth in it, and said, "This is pathetic." But Lauren didn't move. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded envelope, thick enough to hold more than a letter, and when Travis stepped forward to block her, she looked at him with such cold certainty that he stopped. That was the second crack, because Lauren said, "You should be the last person trying to stop me." I turned to Travis, and for the first time that day, he would not look me in the eye. Emily's hand slipped out of mine, not gently, not slowly, like she had just remembered she needed both hands free. Lauren held out the envelope, and although every instinct in me wanted to refuse it, some deeper part of me already knew that if I did not open it right there, in front of everyone, I would spend the rest of my life married to a question. So I took it. Inside were bank statements, screenshots, a copy of an old withdrawal slip, and one printed photograph from a security camera that showed Travis standing at an ATM at 11:43 p.m. on the same night Lauren supposedly stole our house money. But he was not alone. Emily was standing beside him, and she was holding my old debit card. For a moment, I did not understand what I was seeing, because the photograph in my hand belonged to a version of my life I had already buried, a version where Lauren was the thief, Travis was the loyal friend who helped me survive it, and Emily was the clean beginning that came after all that damage. But there they were, Travis and Emily, 3 years younger, standing together at an ATM near Monroe Road, in the middle of the night, with my debit card between them like it was nothing more than a borrowed pen. The church around me blurred, and I remember looking at the photo, then at Emily, then at Travis, trying to force one of them to laugh, explain, deny it, or do anything that would make the image in my hand less real. Neither of them spoke. That silence told me more than any confession could have. Lauren took one step closer, careful not to come too near me, as if she understood that I was standing on the edge of something ugly, and one wrong word might make me turn on her again. "I didn't steal from you, Daniel," she said, and there was no anger in her voice, which somehow made it harder to hear. "I tried to tell you for 3 years, but you had already decided I was guilty." Emily finally moved, not toward me, but toward the envelope, and when she reached for it, I pulled it back without even thinking. Her face changed. It was quick, almost invisible, but I saw it because I was finally looking at her properly. The softness disappeared. The hurt bride vanished. For half a second, the woman under the veil looked cold, practical, and furious, like someone watching a door close on money she had already spent. "Daniel," she said quietly, "you are being manipulated in front of everyone you love." That should have sounded convincing, because Emily had always known how to sound calm when other people sounded emotional, but now her calm felt rehearsed, like a line she had practiced in case this exact disaster ever found its way into the room. I turned to Travis. "Tell me that picture is fake." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Tell me," I said again, louder this time, and I hated how desperate I sounded, because part of me was still begging him to save the friendship even after the evidence was sitting in my hand. Travis looked past me toward Emily, and that tiny glance was enough to make my stomach drop. He was not looking for the truth. He was looking for instructions. My mother stepped into the aisle, one hand pressed against her chest, and whispered, "Daniel, what is going on?" I wanted to answer her, but I didn't know how to tell my mother that the woman she had helped choose centerpieces with might have been standing beside the man who robbed me years before I ever placed a ring on her finger. Lauren pulled another paper from her coat pocket and handed it to me. "This is the account where the cash deposits started after the withdrawal," she said. It was not in Emily's name back then, but it was tied to an LLC registered to her brother. Emily's father stood up from the front row so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "That is enough," he said, his voice loud and polished, the kind of voice rich men use when they expect rooms to obey. "This woman is clearly unstable." Lauren turned toward him, and for the first time since she entered the church, I saw anger break through her control. "Mr. Vaughn, your daughter used my name to destroy me, and if you call me unstable one more time, I will start reading the documents out loud." The church went dead silent again. Emily's father sat back down. That was when I realized Lauren had not come with accusations. She had come with ammunition. I looked at the paper in my hand and saw dates, transfers, account numbers, and names I did not recognize. But one thing stood out immediately. The first deposit into that account had happened 2 days after my $12,000 disappeared. 2 days. For 3 years, I had pictured Lauren sneaking money out of our future, while Travis and Emily had apparently stood in the dark together and watched my life split open. Then another thought hit me so hard I almost stepped backward. I had not met Emily until 6 months after the breakup. At least, that was what I believed. I looked at her and asked, "How did you know Travis back then?" Emily blinked. It was the wrong kind of blink. Too slow. Too controlled. "I didn't," she said. But Travis whispered, "Emily." Just her name. One word. A warning. And suddenly, every small strange thing from the last 2 years started coming back to me with a violence I was not ready for. How Emily had known Travis's drink order the first time they met. How she once laughed at a college story before I had told her the ending. How she always got tense whenever Lauren's name came up, not like a jealous woman, but like a criminal hearing a witness mentioned at dinner. Lauren looked at me as if she could see the memories connecting behind my eyes. "They knew each other before you knew her," she said. "And Daniel, I don't think Emily found you by accident." The words landed in the church like something heavy dropped from a height. Not by accident. I turned toward my bride, and for the first time all day, she looked less like a woman whose wedding had been interrupted and more like a woman whose plan had started failing too early. "Is that true?" I asked. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but this time I saw them arrive too fast. "After everything I've done for you," she said, "you're going to believe her?" It was a beautiful answer because it sounded wounded, but it was not an answer at all. I looked at Travis again. He was sweating now. His hands were clenched at his sides, and his eyes kept moving toward the side exit. Then Lauren said the sentence that made him stop breathing. "Should I tell him about the life insurance paperwork too?" My mother made a small sound, almost like a cry. I looked at her. She covered her mouth. And that was when I understood the nightmare was bigger than stolen money, bigger than an old breakup, bigger than a ruined wedding. Because my mother knew something. And she had known it before Lauren walked into the church. My mother did not look surprised when Lauren said the words, "life insurance paperwork." And that was the detail that cut through me sharper than the photograph, sharper than the bank records, sharper even than the fact that my best man and my bride had been standing together at an ATM 3 years before I was ever supposed to know they were connected. She looked ashamed, not confused. Ashamed. "Mom," I said, and my voice sounded strange to me, lower and rougher, as if it belonged to some other man standing in my place. "What life insurance paperwork?" Emily turned toward my mother, so fast her veil shifted off one shoulder. And the look she gave her was not a warning anymore, not even fear. It was anger, clean and hard, the kind of anger you aim at someone who has just failed to keep their part of a deal. My mother sat back down slowly, one hand gripping the edge of the pew, and for a second she looked older than I had ever seen her, like the weight of whatever she had hidden had finally landed on her bones. "Daniel," she whispered. I didn't know what it was at first. That sentence made the whole church feel smaller. Lauren closed her eyes for a moment, like she had expected this but still hated hearing it, while Travis muttered something under his breath and started moving toward the side aisle. I turned on him immediately. "Don't you move." He froze, and even though I had known him since we were 22, even though he had slept on my couch after his divorce and eaten Thanksgiving dinner at my mother's table, I saw a stranger standing there in a rented black tux, sweating through his collar while my wedding collapsed around him. The pastor stepped forward and asked if we needed to continue this somewhere private, but I shook my head before he finished, because privacy was exactly how these people had survived for 3 years. "No," I said. "Everybody can stay." Emily's lips parted slightly. She hated that. Lauren reached into the envelope again and pulled out another set of papers, folded once across the middle, then handed them to me with the careful expression of someone placing a knife in another person's hand. The top page had my name on it. Daniel Robert Mercer. Below it was an application for a life insurance policy I had never seen, with a payout amount so large my mind refused to accept it at first. $750,000. The beneficiary line was not blank. It said, Emily Vaughn. I stared at it until the letters started swimming. "We're not married," I said, stupidly, because that was the only thing my brain could grab. She can't be my beneficiary. Lauren's voice was quiet. She could be if the policy was submitted with an engagement affidavit, shared residence documents, and a signed authorization from you. I never signed this. I know. I looked down again and saw my signature at the bottom of the page, close enough to fool someone who didn't know me, but wrong in the same way the withdrawal slip had been wrong. Too neat in places where my hand always rushed, and too sharp where mine always softened. Then I saw the witness signature. Elaine Mercer, my mother. The sound that left my mouth was not a word. My mother started crying before I even looked at her. Daniel, I thought it was for the wedding planning account, she said, and the excuse came out so weak that even she seemed to hear it falling apart as she spoke. Emily brought papers to the house, and she said you had asked me to witness something because you were too busy with work, and I didn't read all of it. I swear I didn't read all of it. You signed something with my name on it, I said. No, honey, I witnessed it. You helped them. She shook her head hard, like if she shook it long enough the truth would scatter. I trusted her. So did I. That silenced her. Emily stepped toward me, her face wet now, but her tears no longer had power over me, because once you see the machinery behind a person's emotions, you cannot pretend the show is real. This is being twisted, she said. My company offered financial planning benefits, and I was trying to help us prepare for the future. The future where I die? I asked. A murmur went through the guests. Emily flinched, but only because the room heard me. Not because she was hurt, because she was exposed. Lauren pointed to the second page. The policy was denied at first because the medical section was incomplete, then resubmitted 2 weeks later with updated information about your blood pressure medication and your father's heart condition. My hands went cold. I had never told Emily the exact details of my father's heart condition, but my mother knew. So did Travis. Travis looked at the floor. That was enough. I remembered all the small moments that had felt harmless at the time. Emily asking what medication I kept in the bathroom cabinet. Travis joking that I worked too much and would drop dead before 40. My mother telling Emily stories about my father's final year because she thought they were bonding like family. They had been collecting pieces of me, not loving me, documenting me. My chest tightened so badly I had to loosen my tie. Lauren noticed and took half a step forward, then stopped herself again, and that restraint hurt more than comfort would have, because it reminded me that I had trained her not to reach for me. Emily's father stood once more, but this time he did not shout. He looked at his daughter and said, very quietly, Emily, what did you do? For the first time all afternoon, Emily looked truly afraid. Not of me, of him. That was when I realized her father had not known everything either, or maybe he knew enough to be useful, but not enough to understand that his own name might already be buried somewhere in those papers. Lauren turned another document toward me. This company received the broker commission on the policy application, she said. I looked at the name. Vaughn Strategic Partners, Emily's father's firm. The church erupted into whispers, but I barely heard them because Travis suddenly bolted for the side exit. My cousin Mark moved first, blocking him near the aisle, and Travis shoved him hard enough that Mark hit the pew, which made my mother scream and finally broke whatever thin layer of ceremony was still pretending to exist. 2 men grabbed Travis before he reached the door. He fought like a guilty man, not a confused one. Emily yelled, "Stop embarrassing yourself, Travis," and the words came out so sharp, so familiar, so full of ownership, that every person in the room understood their relationship was not some old misunderstanding. It was active. It was alive, and it had been standing beside me at the altar. I looked at Lauren. How long have you known? Her eyes stayed on mine. About the money? 3 years. About Emily and Travis? 6 months. About the insurance? She swallowed. Since yesterday. Yesterday. I came as soon as I had proof. Behind me, Emily laughed, but it sounded cracked now. She came because she still wants you, she said. That's what this is. Lauren looked at her, and the calm in her voice was colder than any scream. No, Emily. I came because you wanted him married, insured, isolated, and trusting the wrong people before the next policy review. The pastor whispered, Dear God. And for the first time, I wondered whether Lauren had not interrupted my wedding to save my money. Maybe she had interrupted it to save my life. The police arrived while my wedding guests were still sitting in the pews, dressed in pastel ties and flowered dresses, staring at the altar as if they had come to watch two people exchange vows and had accidentally walked into the middle of a crime scene. Nobody knew where to look. Not at me, because I was still standing there with a life insurance application in my hand and a wedding ring in my pocket. Not at Emily, because she had stopped crying completely and was watching the room with a cold, measuring expression that made her look less like a bride and more like someone calculating which door had the fewest witnesses. And not at Lauren, because everyone who had called her bitter, jealous, unstable, or desperate now had to sit with the shame of realizing she might have been the only honest person in the building. Two officers came through the side entrance first, followed by a detective in a dark jacket who looked like he had been pulled away from a Saturday lunch and was already tired of everyone. He spoke quietly with the pastor, then with Lauren, then asked for the envelope. And as soon as she handed it over, Emily stepped forward with her chin lifted. "This woman is harassing us," she said, and her voice was so smooth that, for 1 second, I understood exactly how she had fooled me. She has been stalking my fiancé for months, and now she has disrupted a private family event with forged documents. The detective looked at me. "Sir, is she your fiancé?" I looked at Emily in her white dress, standing under the flowers she had chosen with my money, in front of the people she had been ready to lie to for the rest of the afternoon. Then I said, "No." It was one small word, but it landed harder than any shout. Emily's face tightened. My mother started crying again. Travis, still held near the side aisle by my cousin and another guest, looked at me like I had betrayed him, which was almost funny in a way that made me want to break something. The detective asked everyone directly involved to move into the church office, but I refused to leave the sanctuary until Emily gave me one answer in front of the room. "How did you meet Travis?" She smiled faintly. "That is not important right now." "It is to me." "Daniel, you're emotional." "No," I said, and my voice finally steadied because the worst had already happened. "I was emotional when I believed you. Right now I'm awake." Lauren turned her head toward me, and for the first time since she entered the church, I saw something like grief soften her face. Emily looked at Travis, and he looked away. That was the first real crack in her control. The detective must have seen it too, because he asked Emily the same question. "How did you meet Mr. Cole's best man?" Emily did not answer. Travis did. "At a bar," he muttered. Emily snapped, "Shut up." The whole room heard it. Travis laughed once, bitter and ugly, then pulled himself out of my cousin's grip and raised both hands like he was done performing loyalty for a woman who had just abandoned him in public. "No," he said. "I'm not taking all of this." Emily's father stood up. "Travis, I suggest you stop talking." That was when Lauren turned to him and said, "You should stop giving legal advice before they ask why your firm paid Travis last year." Emily's father went still. The detective looked at Lauren. "Paid him for what?" Lauren opened her mouth, but Travis answered first, because panic had finally made him stupid enough to be useful. "For finding men like Daniel." A sound moved through the church, not quite a gasp, not quite a scream, but something collective and horrified, as if every person understood at the same time that I had not been chosen by love. I had been selected. My mouth went dry. What does that mean? Travis looked at Emily, then at her father, then back at me, and what I saw on his face was not remorse. It was resentment, the same old poison I had mistaken for friendship. "It means you were perfect," he said. "Lonely, decent credit, family business, dead father, guilty mother, no brothers, no one watching the books closely, and an ex everybody already thought was a problem." For a second, I could not feel my hands. Emily whispered, "Travis." But he was past stopping. "You think she met you by chance at that fundraiser?" he said, almost laughing now. "I gave her the donor list, your schedule, your divorce history even though you were never married, your bank habits, everything. She knew what drink to order, what to say about your dad, when to act impressed by the company, when to make you feel small so you'd let her fix you." I turned toward Emily, and she did not deny it. That was the moment my mind finally understood the scale of it. She had not walked into my life. She had been sent into it. Lauren's voice was low behind me. "And the $12,000? Travis looked at her for the first time, and something like shame crossed his face, but it vanished quickly. "That was the test," he said. "If Daniel believed you did it, he'd believe anything about you later." Lauren's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "So you destroyed my life to see if your plan would work." Travis shrugged. and that tiny movement made me want to put him through the nearest window. Emily's father said, "Detective, my daughter is not saying another word." But Emily suddenly laughed. It was soft at first, then louder, and when she looked at me, there was no bride left in her face at all. "You want the truth, Daniel?" she asked. "Fine. The truth is you were never supposed to be hurt. You were supposed to be grateful." "Grateful?" "Yes," she said, stepping closer even as one officer moved with her. "You were drowning in that little company, carrying your dead father around like a religion, and I was going to turn it into something real. You were going to drain it. I was going to sell it. That hit me like a punch. My company was never for sale." Emily tilted her head. "Everything is for sale when the owner becomes unstable." The detective's eyes narrowed. Lauren whispered, "What does that mean?" Emily smiled at her. "It means Daniel was about to have a very difficult year. Stress, financial mistakes, a few angry voicemails. Maybe a breakdown people would understand after a messy wedding and an obsessive ex resurfacing." My mother covered her mouth. I finally saw the full shape of it. They were not just going to take my money. They were going to make me look crazy enough to lose control of my own business, sick enough to trigger the insurance review, and broken enough that nobody would question why Emily stepped in to help. Then the detective's phone rang. He listened for less than 30 seconds before his expression changed. When he hung up, he looked directly at Emily. "Officers found prescription sedatives in the bridal suite," he said. "Bottle has Mr. Mercer's name on it." I stared at him. "I don't take sedatives." Emily did not move, but Lauren did. She turned toward me with pure fear in her eyes and said, "Daniel, did you drink anything before the ceremony?" And suddenly, I remembered the glass of champagne Emily had handed me 30 minutes before I walked down the aisle. The one she kissed me after I finished, the one she said would calm my nerves. Then my knees weakened. The church tilted. And the last thing I saw before everything went dark was Lauren running toward me, while Emily stood perfectly still. I woke up in the back of an ambulance with an oxygen mask pressed against my face, a blood pressure cuff squeezing my arm, and Lauren sitting on the bench beside me with both hands wrapped around mine, as if she had decided that, whether I deserved it or not, I was not going to disappear while she was watching. For a few seconds I did not remember the church, the papers, the photograph, the life insurance policy, or Emily standing perfectly still while the room tilted around me. And in that small empty space before memory came back, I almost felt peaceful. Then I saw Lauren's face. Her eyes were red. Her hair was still damp from the rain, and there was a tiny smear of my blood on her sleeve where, I later learned, I had hit my head against the edge of a pew when my legs gave out. "Did she do it?" I asked, though my voice was so rough beneath the mask that the words barely sounded human. Lauren leaned closer, and for one painful second I saw the woman who used to fall asleep against my shoulder during late movies, the woman I had accused, shamed, and left standing alone in my driveway while my best friend watched her break. "They found the bottle," she said. "They found the champagne glass too." I closed my eyes because the truth was no longer arriving like lightning. It was arriving like floodwater, rising inch by inch until every safe place in my mind was gone. At the hospital, a detective took my statement while a nurse checked my pupils and asked if I knew my name, the date, and where I was, and I wanted to laugh because I knew those things, but I no longer knew who had been loving me, who had been using me, or how many people had touched my life with dirty hands while smiling like family. Lauren stayed outside the room until the detective asked her to come in, and when she entered, she did not sit beside my bed right away. She stood near the wall, careful, distant, still behaving like someone who had been punished too long for caring. That hurt worse than the 4 in my arm. The toxicology results were not finished yet, but the emergency doctor said the symptoms matched a sedative mixed with alcohol, not enough to kill a healthy man outright, but enough to cause confusion, collapse, memory gaps, and the kind of public breakdown that could be written into a very useful story later. A nervous groom drinks too much. A business owner melts down at the altar. An unstable man embarrasses his wealthy bride. An ex-girlfriend appears. Chaos follows. And suddenly everyone agrees Daniel Mercer has not been himself lately. By midnight, the detective came back with the first real update, and the look on his face told me the news was not good before he opened his mouth. "Emily Vaughn says you took the pills yourself," he said. Lauren made a sound under her breath. I stared at him. "I don't even know where they came from." She claims you asked her to hold them because you were anxious about the wedding, and she says your ex showing up triggered a panic episode. Of course she did. Even in handcuffs, Emily was still building the version of me she needed the world to believe. The detective continued, "There's a problem with that story. The prescription was filled 3 days ago at a pharmacy in Pineville, and security footage shows a woman matching Emily's description picking it up. She used my name? She used your name, your birth date, and insurance information that appears to have been accessed through paperwork submitted with the life insurance file." I looked toward the window, where the hospital lights reflected back a pale version of my own face, and I barely recognized the man staring back at me. Lauren folded her arms tightly. "She was never going to wait long," she said. The detective turned to her. "What do you mean?" Lauren looked at me first, and I understood that whatever she was about to say would hurt me, so she was giving me one final second before it did. "The policy review was scheduled for next week," she said. "If Daniel had a documented medical or mental health incident before then, especially one with alcohol, medication, and public witnesses, it could support the argument that he was unstable but still insurable under certain adjusted terms." The detective frowned. "You're saying the collapse was useful. I'm saying it was the point." The room went silent except for the soft beeping beside my bed. I thought about Emily handing me that glass of champagne in the bridal suite, touching my tie, smiling as she told me she loved me, and I realized she had been watching to see whether I drank all of it. Not tasting it with me, not celebrating, watching. My mother came to the hospital just after 1 in the morning, escorted by my cousin Mark, and she looked so broken when she stepped into the room that for one weak moment I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered her signature. She stood at the foot of my bed, unable to come closer. "Daniel," she said. I told them everything I knew. I did not answer. She pressed a tissue to her mouth and looked at Lauren, then back at me. "Emily came to me months ago and said you were under more stress than you admitted. She said you were embarrassed by anxiety, that you refused help, and that if anything ever happened, she needed medical background because she was going to be your wife. And you gave it to her," I said. "I thought I was helping her take care of you." "No," I said, and my voice stayed quiet, which seemed to frighten her more than shouting would have. "You helped her build a file." My mother covered her face. "I didn't know about the pills." Lauren spoke before I could. "But you knew about me." My mother froze. Lauren's voice did not rise, yet every word carried the weight of 3 stolen years. "You knew I kept calling. You knew I was asking Daniel to check the bank records. You knew Travis was the only person who kept pushing him not to look closer." My mother looked at the floor. "I thought you were trying to pull him away from the company." Lauren nodded slowly, as if that answer confirmed something she had already made peace with. "No, Mrs. Mercer. I was trying to keep him alive inside it." That sentence landed in the room and stayed there. For the first time, my mother looked at Lauren not like a threat, not like an old wound, but like the woman she had helped erase from my life. Then the detective's phone buzzed again. He listened, wrote something down, and looked at me with a strange expression. "They searched Travis Hale's apartment," he said. "They found files on 3 other men." My mouth went dry. "All business owners?" Lauren asked. The detective nodded. "Small companies, no strong family oversight, recent grief or divorce, decent assets, and one of them had an ex-girlfriend who was also accused of stealing money before Emily entered his life." I turned my head toward Lauren. She looked horrified, but not surprised. Emily had not been my nightmare. She had been a system. And somewhere between the heart monitor, my mother's crying, and Lauren standing at the wall like a ghost I had once refused to believe, I understood that my ruined wedding was not the end of the story. It was the first crime scene they had failed to control. By the next morning, my wedding had become the kind of story people whispered about before they pretended not to know the details. Because in a city like Charlotte, a collapsed ceremony, a poisoned groom, a runaway bride in handcuffs, and a best man tied to 3 other financial targets did not stay private for long. My phone would not stop vibrating. Some people wanted to know if I was okay. Some wanted to apologize for believing Lauren was crazy, and some, which disgusted me more than anything, wanted to ask whether Emily had really tried to kill me or whether that was just something people were saying. I did not answer any of them. I sat in the hospital bed with a headache behind my eyes, Lauren's envelope on the table beside me, and my mother sleeping upright in a chair across the room after crying herself into a kind of exhausted silence. Lauren had gone home around dawn because the detective needed copies of files from her laptop, and when she left, she did not hug me, did not promise to come back, did not give me any soft moment to hide inside. She simply said, "Don't let them make this smaller than it is." That sentence stayed with me, because everyone else wanted the story to shrink. Emily's attorney wanted it to be a misunderstanding. Travis wanted it to be Emily's plan. Emily's father wanted it to be a private family matter that had gotten out of control. My mother wanted it to be a terrible mistake made by a lonely woman who trusted the wrong people. But Lauren was right. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a machine, and I had almost married the prettiest part of it. The detective came back a little after 9 with a folder under his arm and a tired look that told me he had been reading all night. He sat beside my bed and said, "Daniel, there's something you need to understand before you hear the rest." I already hated the sentence. He opened the folder and placed 3 photographs on the blanket in front of me. The first was me at the fundraiser where I had met Emily. The second was me walking out of my office 2 weeks before that fundraiser. The third was me standing at my father's grave, alone, holding a cup of coffee. I stared at that last one for a long time. There are certain kinds of violation that do not feel loud at first. They feel quiet, intimate, almost impossible to explain, because nobody had stolen money from me in that picture, nobody had drugged me, nobody had forged a signature, but someone had followed me to the one place where I still spoke to my father like he could hear me. "Who took these?" I asked. The detective's mouth tightened. "We found them on Travis's computer." My mother woke up then, or maybe she had only been pretending to sleep, because she whispered, "Oh my God," and covered her mouth. The detective continued. "There are notes attached to each file. Personal habits, stress points, family structure, financial pressure, emotional vulnerabilities." I looked down at the photograph of myself by the grave. What did it say about this one? He hesitated. I looked at him until he answered. It said, "Father attachment remains primary control point." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. They had turned grief into strategy. My father's death, my guilt over the company, my need to prove I could keep his name alive. Even the way I visited his grave every Sunday morning, all of it had been studied, written down, and handed to Emily like instructions. That was when my mother finally stood. "I gave Emily his Sunday routine," she said, her voice hollow. She asked me what helped him feel close to his father, and I thought she wanted to understand him. I did not look at her. If I looked at her, I knew I would either forgive too quickly or say something I could never take back, and I was not ready for either. The detective slid one more page from the folder. "There are messages between Emily and Travis from the week before your wedding." He handed it to me. I read the first line and felt my whole body go cold. "Emily, if Lauren shows up, let her. We can use it. Travis, too risky. She has docs. Emily, not if Daniel collapses first. Then she looks like the trigger." For a few seconds, I could not speak. Lauren had walked into that church thinking she was exposing Emily, but Emily had already planned to turn Lauren's truth into proof that I was unstable. My ex was supposed to become the villain one last time, and I was supposed to become the weak man who broke in public. The detective took the page back gently, maybe because he could see my hand shaking. "Travis is talking," he said. "Not because he's sorry, but because he thinks giving up Emily and her father will save him." And will it? No. Good. That was the first thing all morning that felt clean. Around noon, Lauren returned with her laptop bag over one shoulder, and the moment she stepped into the room, my mother rose from the chair like she wanted to speak. Lauren stopped near the door. My mother said, "I owe you an apology." Lauren looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," she said, "you do." My mother started crying again, but Lauren did not comfort her, and I was grateful for that, because some tears deserve to be witnessed without being rewarded. "I was wrong about you," my mother said. Lauren's face stayed calm, but her voice changed, just slightly. "You weren't just wrong. You helped him hate me." My mother folded in on herself as if the words had struck her physically. I closed my eyes, because hearing it said plainly hurt more than I expected. Lauren turned to me next. "I found something else," she said. Of course she had. I almost smiled from exhaustion. She placed her laptop on the rolling table and opened a video file, and when the frozen image appeared on the screen, I saw Emily sitting in her Lexus outside my office, speaking to someone in the passenger seat. The passenger leaned forward. It was Travis. The video had sound, rough but clear enough. Emily said, after the wedding, I need him isolated from Lauren permanently. Travis asked, and if she keeps digging? Emily smiled. Then we make sure Daniel thinks she's still obsessed. The recording paused there, but Lauren did not look finished. I stared at her. How did you get this? She swallowed. Your office camera. The one you installed after the break-in last year. I never checked that footage. I know, she said, but I did. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and understood that while I had been preparing to marry a woman who studied me like prey, the woman I had thrown away had spent months quietly gathering enough truth to save me from a life that might have ended with my name on a policy and Emily crying beautifully at my funeral. I wanted to say something that could carry the size of that. Nothing could, so I only said, "Why did you keep helping me?" Lauren's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. Because once I loved you, she said, and because even after you stopped deserving my help, you still deserve the truth. That was the moment I finally broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely, because forgiveness was not in the room yet. Love was not in the room either, but truth was. And after 3 years of lies, truth felt almost unbearable. I was released from the hospital that evening with a concussion, a warning not to drive, and a plastic bag containing the tuxedo shirt they had cut open in the ambulance, which felt like the most pathetic wedding souvenir any man had ever carried home. Lauren offered to drive me, but she did it in that careful way people offer help when they are giving you a choice instead of rescuing you. And I hated myself for remembering how many times she had once helped me without making me feel weak. My mother wanted to come too. I told her no. She stood in the hospital hallway with her purse clutched in both hands, looking small beneath the fluorescent lights, and for 1 second I saw the woman who raised me after my father worked double shifts, the woman who packed my lunches, sat through my baseball games, and cried harder than anyone at his funeral. Then I saw her signature on the insurance witness line. I need time, I said. She nodded, but her face broke anyway. Lauren said nothing as we walked to her car, and the silence between us was not empty. It was crowded with all the things we could not fix by talking too soon. The drive back to my townhouse took 25 minutes, and Charlotte looked painfully normal through the windshield, with people leaving restaurants, teenagers laughing outside a gas station, and couples walking dogs under streetlights as if my entire life had not been cracked open in public the day before. When we pulled into my driveway, Lauren turned off the engine but did not get out. There are reporters outside your office, she said. I looked at her. How do you know? Because one of your employees called me. That hurt in a strange way, because even my own people had somehow understood that Lauren was safer than the woman I had almost married. Who? Maria. Maria ran scheduling for my company and had worked for my father before she worked for me. She was blunt, loyal, and terrifying when someone touched the thermostat without permission. She said Emily came by twice last month when you weren't there, Lauren continued. Once she asked for vendor files, and once she asked about payroll access. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. Did Maria give it to her? Lauren almost smiled. Maria told her to come back with your written approval and a better attitude. For the first time in 24 hours, I laughed, and it came out broken but real. Inside the house, everything looked exactly the same and completely unfamiliar. Emily's overnight bag was still beside the couch. Her coffee mug sat in the sink. A framed engagement photo leaned on the bookshelf, showing me smiling beside a woman who had memorized my life in order to steal it. I picked it up and stared at it. Lauren stood near the door, not crossing too far into the room. You don't have to do this tonight, she said. Yes, I do. I took the photo out of the frame, tore it once down the middle, then again through Emily's face, and the action should have felt dramatic, but it mostly felt practical, like removing spoiled food from the refrigerator. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Lauren's expression changed before I answered. Don't, she said. But I already knew who it was, and some part of me needed to hear her voice without the veil, without the church, without the audience. I put it on speaker. Emily laughed softly. Daniel, she said, as if we were having a private argument after a dinner party. You have no idea how ugly this gets if I start talking. Lauren's eyes sharpened. I stayed quiet. Emily continued. You think Lauren saved you, but she didn't tell you everything either. There it was again. The hook. The poison. The little door she wanted me to open. What didn't she tell me? I asked. Lauren did not move, but I saw her face tighten. Emily heard the silence and slipped into it like a knife. She knew about me earlier than she said. She had my name months before the wedding, and she waited because she wanted proof. Yes, but also because part of her wanted to watch you walk far enough toward the altar to finally understand what you did to her. For a moment, the room went very still. Lauren looked down. That was enough for Emily to smile through the phone. "Oh," Emily said. "There it is." I turned toward Lauren. "Is that true?" Lauren lifted her eyes slowly, and for the first time since she had walked into the church, shame crossed her face. "I knew Emily's name 4 months ago," she said. "I knew she was connected to Travis, but I didn't know the insurance, the sedatives, or how far it went. And the wedding? I tried to reach you before it. You blocked me. I went to your office. You were gone. I called your mother. She hung up on me." Emily laughed again. "But you still waited until the church." Lauren's voice broke, but she did not hide from the accusation. "Yes," she said, "because I needed witnesses this time." That sentence hit me hard because I understood it immediately. 3 years earlier, Lauren had told the truth alone, on my porch, with no documents in her hand and no one beside her, while Travis and my mother helped me turn her into the liar. This time, she had made sure the truth had nowhere to die. Emily went quiet, as if she realized the blade had not cut as deep as she wanted. I picked up the phone. "You're done," I said. Her voice changed. "You really think that?" "I know it." "No, Daniel," she said, colder now. "You know what people can prove, and that is not the same thing as knowing what happened." Then the line went dead. Lauren and I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the remains of the life Emily had built around me, and neither of us spoke until my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Emily. A single photograph. My mother, sitting with Emily at a restaurant downtown, 6 months before I supposedly met her. Under it, Emily had written, "Ask Elaine who introduced us." I called my mother 3 times before she answered, and when she finally picked up, she did not say hello, because I think she already knew that whatever had been hiding between us had run out of places to hide. "Who introduced you to Emily?" I asked. There was silence on the line, but it was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a woman choosing which version of the truth might hurt the least. "Daniel," she whispered, "I thought she could help you." Lauren stood across from me in the living room, arms folded, face pale but steady, and the torn engagement photo lay on the coffee table between us like evidence from someone else's life. "Help me how?" I asked. My mother breathed in shakily. "After your father died, I went to a business planning seminar downtown, one of those legacy events for family-owned companies, and Emily was there with her father's firm. She talked about protecting what men like your dad built, about keeping sons from drowning in businesses they felt too guilty to sell, and I told her too much because she made me feel like she understood. I closed my eyes. Of course she understood. She had been trained to. "She asked about you?" I said. "At first, no, not directly. She asked about the company, your stress, your routines, your father, Lauren, everything, but she made it sound professional, like she was building a profile for some future consultation." Lauren looked away at the mention of her name. "And then what?" I asked. My mother's voice cracked. "Then Travis showed up at one of the meetings. The room seemed to tighten around me. My best friend had not simply handed Emily my life from the outside. My mother had brought both ends of the rope close enough for them to tie it around me. He said he was worried about you too," she continued. "He said Lauren was pressuring you, that you wouldn't listen to anyone, that if the wrong woman got control of the company, everything your father built would disappear." I almost laughed, but nothing came out. "So you introduced Emily to Travis?" I thought I was introducing two people who both wanted to protect you. "No," I said, and this time my voice did not shake. "You introduced a predator to a man who already knew where I was weak." She started crying then, but her crying no longer moved me the way it used to, because some damage is too large to be softened by tears. Lauren took one step closer, not to comfort me, but to stay near enough that I would not be alone inside the next question. "Did you set up the fundraiser where I met Emily?" I asked. My mother did not answer. That was the answer. I lowered the phone slowly, and for a second I could see that night again. Emily in the black dress, the easy laugh, the perfect first conversation, the way she had mentioned my father before I had, then apologized as if she had only guessed too closely. It had not been fate. It had been staging. Lauren spoke quietly. Ask her if she knew Emily was married to Travis. I repeated the question. My mother gasped. No. God, no, Daniel. I swear I didn't know that. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she did not know about the sedatives, the forged policy, the stolen money, or the other men whose lives had been measured and marked like houses before a burglary. But she had known enough to open the door. That was the part one could not forgive yet. I need you to send everything to the detective, I said. Emails, texts, seminar invitations, every document Emily or her father ever gave you. I will. And after that, don't call me for a while. The sound she made was small and broken. Daniel, I'm your mother. I know, I said. That's why this hurts. Then I ended the call. For a long time, Lauren and I stood in silence, and I realized that the house did not feel haunted by Emily anymore. It felt haunted by every moment I had misunderstood, every warning I had ignored, and every person I had trusted because it was easier than admitting I was lonely. The next months did not heal anything quickly. They only made the truth more organized. Travis took a deal and gave up names, accounts, messages, and recordings, not because he found a conscience, but because cowards always become honest when the walls close in. Emily's father's firm was raided 2 weeks later, and by the end of the summer, 3 other men had come forward, each with a different version of the same story. Grief, money, a charming woman, a loyal friend who was not loyal at all, and an ex who had been painted crazy because crazy women are easier to ignore than inconvenient ones. Emily fought everything. She smiled in court. She wore soft colors. She looked smaller than she was. But the files were real, the camera footage was real, the prescription was real, and the champagne glass had enough of the truth on it that even her best lies could not wash it clean. My company survived, but it did not survive unchanged. I hired Maria as operations manager, gave her access to everything, and told her that if I ever got too proud to listen, she had permission to scare me straight in front of God and payroll. She said she had been waiting years to hear that. Lauren and I did not fall back into each other's arms, because life is not that generous and pain does not become romance just because the truth arrives late. We met for coffee sometimes. We talked carefully. Some days she laughed like the woman I remembered, and some days I saw the distance in her eyes and knew that I had put it there. The last time we met, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a copy of the old bank record proving Travis had taken the $12,000, the first lie that had started everything. I kept this for closure, she said, but I think you need it more than I do now. I looked at the paper, then at her. I don't know how to repay you. Lauren smiled sadly. You don't. You just stop being the kind of man who needs a woman to bleed before he believes her. That stayed with me longer than any court date. A year after the wedding that never happened, I went back to the church alone. Not to pray for Emily, not to forgive Travis, not even to think about my mother. I stood near the altar where I had almost promised my life to a lie, and for the first time I did not feel embarrassed that everyone had seen me fall apart there. Because maybe some traps only break when they break in public. As I was leaving, my phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. I found one more name in Travis's files. Call me when you can. I stood under the church doors, looking out at the rain, and for a moment I almost laughed at how little peace the truth gives you once it starts moving. My ex did not ruin my wedding. She ruined the plan. And the part that still keeps me awake is wondering how many people in my life were waiting to see if she would fail.